I'm gonna seemingly start in a very weird place and kind of work my way back to the point I'm making about Scripture. So the thing that we never use anymore, the typewriter, was pretty revolutionary when it came out. It was invented in the 1870s. There were precursors, of course, but the one that we know today with the QWERTY keyboard was invented in the 1870s and then went into mass production for businesses because it was expensive in the 1880s. And then by the 1890s and the early 1900s, middle-class people could afford one, bring it home, learn how to type, and then that was something that they could work away at. Concurrently with this, though, there was something interesting happened in the newspapers and talk amongst people and academics and in the universities. They felt that they were on the cusp of a new golden age of prose and poetry, that there would be this explosion of new novels, of poems, of plays, and everybody was just waiting for it. And it never happened. The truth of the matter is, if you can't write a play or a novel or a poem with a pen and paper, having a typewriter is not going to make that any different for you. And we look back on that as a bit of naivete, and we kind of, we think it's funny now. However, there's two things that have happened that have affected us in a negative way, and I think people in the future may look back on us the same way we look back on this phenomenon with the typewriter and how people thought it would affect culture and the world. The two things I want to talk about, one of my favorite topics, and then the second that we all know about. First one is the Second World War. I don't want to talk about the battles. I want to talk about this. For the first time in human history, you had tens of millions of people, farmers, shopkeepers, who had never gone 5 or 10 miles away from home, suddenly taken thousands of miles away, literally to the other side of the globe, to be in the South Pacific, to find themselves in European countries, and to interacting with people that they never would have otherwise. Not saying the war was a good thing, I'm not saying that, but that's what happened. And then all those people came back home, and they couldn't pretend that the wide world wasn't out there. They always knew about it, of course. There were maps up on the wall in their one-room schoolhouse. But now it was a reality. And the American Navy was, as you can guess, the biggest in the world. So a deal was struck. They realized a whole bunch of these smaller countries throughout the world had stuff that they needed, and they had those countries wanting things from them. So they said, hey, if you trade with us, we will protect all the sea routes because you don't have a navy. Second biggest navy in the world. Anybody know whose it was? Ours. We had the second biggest navy. I don't know where that went. Anyway, just a quick aside. So you had the beginning of what we call globalism today. Instead of thinking strictly about your neighborhood and your county, maybe your country, people were thinking on a global scale. The second thing that added fuel to that was the internet. We all know this. But like the typewriter, people are still in the throes of thinking that because I've started a YouTube channel or a podcast or I'm on social media, now I'm an influencer. I have global reach. People in Taiwan and Brazil and Australia can read and look at what I'm putting out there. And there are a lot of younger people who are pursuing that as a job. But let me point out to you that if you were not going to become influential and famous before the internet, you are not going to become influential and famous because of the internet. If you are talented, if you are brilliant, that would get recognized. Might be a little bit harder to get the traction, but the internet's not going to make any of us more brilliant, more shiny, more influential, more intelligent than we were before the internet. What does this have to do with church? The modern age has brought us, and I've said this many times, I wouldn't go back 80 years, 60 years, 50 years in the past. we've developed too many good things. Dentistry, medical knowledge, the ability to listen to books on audio, and there's thousands of things that I can't list. One thing, though, that globalism and the internet has brought to us is a feeling that the grand gesture is more important than the small things. Reagan famously said, the 9 worst words that people can hear in an emergency is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. We talk more than our ancestors, our predecessors ever did when something comes up. They never said things like this. Someone should do something about that. Why don't they do something about that? Where do my taxes go? Isn't this why we pay taxes? Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Our ancestors, the church was not only the social center of our communities, but the thing that we've lost is the feeling that if something is happening around us, if there's a homeless crisis in the neighborhood we live in, if the food bank needs help. Now, I'm using that as an example that we have addressed. As an example, this is the thing to do. It's our responsibility. Family, friends, neighbors, colleagues used to see something happening and say immediately, not, I got to write to my local representative and send an email or a letter. Instead, they said, what can we do about that? And it would get addressed. And I think, sorry, I don't know, I've got a super dry mouth today. Sorry about this. And I think these things, we need to come back to what it says in the Lord's Prayer. It's not, give us this day our grand gesture. It's not, give us this day our global reach. It's, give us this day our daily bread. People don't come to church because of the institution. They come to the church because of you. And I want to reread you what Paul says here. Although I am the very least of all the saints, and who hasn't felt like that? Although I am the very least of all the saints, the grace was given to me to bring to the Gentiles the news of the boundless riches of Christ, and to make everyone see what is the plan of the mystery hidden for ages in God, who created all things. And how did Paul do that? He went to every synagogue he could. He talked to every person he could. He talked to Gentiles. He talked to Jews. He spoke in the synagogues. And eventually, when I kicked out of the synagogues, he talked in the marketplaces. And he went from place to place to place. And people came to faith because of the power of the words. And one of those things as individual Christians we feel in this very global, huge world we live in. We feel anonymous and weak. And the furthest thing from influential. But the reality is that people are watching us. And I don't mean that in a 1984 be terrified sort of way. But they look to us. People do look to you. If I wear my collar out, I'm on my way home, I stop off at the grocery store to grab stuff. It has often happened where people, strangers, will talk to me because they know I'm a Christian. And they'll ask me questions. Now, sometimes they're gotcha questions. Can God create a boulder so big he can't lift it? Or they are meaningful questions about the faith. And you've heard this. I used to come to church, but insert bad thing that happened, and I don't go anymore. And I have to tell you what a tremendous opportunity that is for you. I've actually apologized to people who were insulted by parishioners I've never met or by clergy I've never met. And the effect of that is tremendous. You are that light in the world. Here in Isaiah where it says, arise, shine, for your light has come, That's you. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For darkness shall cover the earth, thick darkness the peoples. But the Lord will arise upon you, and his glory will appear over you. I can't remember if I was a student priest or I'd just been ordained, but it was early on. And I got a call to go and do, I may have told you this, but to do a funeral. And the funeral director let me know that this was probably going to be a difficult one because the family really wasn't Christian, but they wanted a Christian funeral. So I show up, and it was during the viewing, so it was last minute. And the man whose funeral it was 45 years old. He left 2 kids and his widow. He's in the casket, and they have him in a t-shirt, and the t-shirt says, "Life is simple, eat, sleep, drink beer." That's what he's laying in the casket wearing, right? I go into the meeting to talk about the service. The first person who comes to meet me is the sister of the widow. Her name was Mary, and her first words out of her mouth, I said, "Hi, I'm Lee." She says, "I'm Mary, I'm a pagan." I thought, boy, this is going to be fun. I sit in the meeting, and it was the most depressing meeting I'd ever been party to. The widow was beaten down. Mary took the lead. Every bit of scripture I read, she would sigh and huff, and the 2 kids followed her lead. Eventually, the girl, who's about 14, looks at her mom in the middle of me speaking and says, "Mom, do I have to stick around for this stuff?" Didn't use the word stuff. Her mom goes, I guess you can go. And then the boy says, "Well, she goes. I don't want to be here for this." So the 2 of them storm out. Mary says, "Well, I'm going to." Walks out. The wife turns to me and says, "I'm sorry, just do whatever you think is best." So I go home that night to prepare the service, and I'm sitting at my desk, and I'm trying to strip out everything that is going to freak these people out. I took the creed out, I took all these different things out. And then about midnight, I got tired, and it hit me. I thought, you know what? No. I am going to load this service up. I put the prayers of the people back in. I put the Apostles' Creed back. No, it was the Nicene Creed I put in, just for good measure. I loaded that service up. We get to the service day. I'm going, I thought it was a great service. We go through it. Service ends. And like a little bulldog, because she was like 4 feet tall, Mary's heading up the aisle, right? People getting out of her way. She comes up to me, and you know what she says to me? She says, "That was the best funeral I've ever been to." And I was exhausted. I don't think I did a good job. But here's what I took away from that, and I've always remembered. The words of God have a power, transcendent power, to change people's lives. And all you need do is repeat it to them. Don't worry about being shiny and intelligent and brilliant and bright and global and an influencer. Just tell the truth as you know it. And tell them about Scripture and what brought you to the faith. And I guarantee you, that's sufficient for the salvation of people's souls. It really is. And they come to church because they know you. Not because the building's here, but because of you.